Hi, my name is Sean Blanton, but my friends call me Sean Michael or Run Bum. I've run over 300 ultra marathons. I've been first, last, and everything in between. I started and owned Run Bum Races, where we put on 11 trail and ultra running races a year from Central Florida to Southern Virginia. I hope that with my trail running and race directing experience that I can help you train smarter, run further, and fall in love with trail running. If you find this podcast helpful and or entertaining, please help me out by sharing it. I'd also like to invite you to run or volunteer at one of our mini races. Welcome, friends, to the Bend Don't Break podcast. So guys, today we have somebody very, very special on the podcast. This is our first official podcast without Scott and I on our episode 0. We have Dink Taylor from Huntsville, Alabama, of course, legendary runner, race director, and just all around awesome guy. He's run Western States, countless amounts of ultra marathons. He's won many races, strolling gym. He's run that 36 years in a row now. He's been the race director for Mountain Mist 50K that everybody knows about for 29 years running, if I'm not mistaken. So everybody, let's welcome Dink Taylor.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, buddy. So hopefully I got all that stuff correct.
Pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. So it's interesting. So I've been ultra running for 15 years now, and always your name comes up, not only with race directing, with Mountain Mist, but also all the things that you've run yourself. When I first started out running, I remember one of the first times I ran Mountain Mist, actually ran with you. And then I think you blew by me like 15 miles in, and I was like, "Hey, isn't that the race director?"
Well, that's somehow I did manage to run the race 3 times. I probably won't ever do it again. I don't recommend race directors running the races, but that was probably the 20th anniversary of the race, and everybody insisted that I had to run. And as you know, as a race director yourself, I made that decision literally 5 minutes before the race. I was like, everything is running smooth. You know, I think I can jump in here and run it. And I was still young enough that I thought I could, finish in the top 15 or 20 and not miss a whole lot in a race as big as Mountain Mist. This year we had 411 finishers. But I felt like I could literally run it and then go right back to work. And that's basically what I did. So it was good to have some ultramarathon experience because that was a long day.
Yeah. So I guess now we're talking about Mountain Mist. Let's kind of dive into that a little bit. So you've been the race director for all 29 years of the race.
Correct. So it goes back, I've been told it's better to be a has-been than a never-been. I used to be a decent runner back in my day. It was never that good. I knew in high school I was very slow. I say slow. I was a 450 miler. That's not fast by any means these days in the mile. But I noticed that I could keep the pace longer, slow down just a little bit, and I could hold the pace for a long time. So I got interested in long distance running at a very young age and ran my first marathon when I was 16.
Wow.
And ended up running a 2:56 in my first marathon because, 6:45 pace felt a lot easier than, a 450 mile all out, which still it's not very fast. But I just said I always liked running longer distances. So I got interested in long distance running at a very young age. And in fact, I ran my first 100 miler when I was 21 years old. And there's more people doing it these days at that age. But you're talking about 1986 and there weren't that many, trail races around. There weren't a ton of ultra marathons. I didn't even know about many. In fact, I got a subscription to Ultra Running Magazine, found it in the back of Runner's World magazine. I was reading it and I came across this ad and I was like, what is ultra running? And this was probably when I was about 19. And I got an issue in and I found Strolling Gym 40 in there in the back on the race calendar. And I was like, that's not that far from here. It's a 90-minute drive. I should do that race. Well, it turns out I just missed it. It was the Saturday before I got my first issue of Ultra Running. But quickly I noticed there was a 24-hour race like in a couple of weeks in Atlanta over some high school. And I jumped in there and ran that thing. And, of course, I did like 80 miles and I'd never run beyond a marathon.
Yeah.
And this was in May. It was real hot in Atlanta. I was like, I'll never do that again. And then, of course, 3 months later, I was back and ended up running another 24-hour and did 107 miles in my second ultra, and then got hooked. Well, then after years of running, I was only 21. There weren't many trail runs. I didn't know a lot about trails. I knew there were some trails here in Huntsville, and me and a buddy of mine, his name was Mark Dummer, we used to run on Monte Sano every Thursday, and we did a 10-mile tempo run. And the course went right through the state park, and I would see these little side trails, and I thought, those are for hikers. And one day we decided to jump on the Plateau Loop, which is just our easy 3.5-mile loop, and we did it. And then I found the Mountain Mist Trail, and I ran on it. And next thing I know, I'm running on these trails all the time, and I'm reading about trail running in Ultra Running Magazine. And when I got up in, mid to upper 20s, I started realizing that there was no trail runs in Alabama, and that if somebody was going to do it, I needed to be the one to do it. I'm like, I got to get people on the trails around here. These are some great trails. They're hard. And lo and behold, I knew I couldn't do it alone, so I went to the Huntsville Track Club to one of their board meetings, laid out my course, laid out how I was going to set up my aid stations and how I was going to do everything. And the board approved it. I wanted to do it in March. They said the only request we have is you put it in January because there's no races on the calendar in January and on the Huntsville Track Club schedule. So that's how the race ended up in January. And I was like, well, that'll be good. I won't have to worry about snakes. I won't have to worry about heat,
Right.
things like that. And so the race has been in January all 29 years. I am the only race director. The nice thing about that race was it's the oldest and largest trail run, of course, in Alabama, but it's probably one of the older ones in the Southeast when it comes to trail runs. But I knew that it could spur interest in other trail races in the area. And I mean, and look where we are now. As far as 29 years later, I mean, you got the whole Penhody Trail series. There's races around here on trails literally every month now. But it all basically started with Mountain Mist.
That's so cool. I mean, listening to that, it's like I can relate a lot to that. But I want to go back as a race director and as a runner. And I want to go back to a couple things you hit on. Number one, just to point out to people, it's like what is so incredible to me is like, you're like, oh, I ran my, I think you said your first ultra in 1986. That's when I was born.
Yep.
So you've literally been running ultra marathons for as long as I've been alive. That's awesome.
Yeah. Like my dad, we used to come home from work, and this was in the 70s, and every day me and my buddies would be out, playing wiffle ball or football or just something, and he'd always come home from work and go for a run. And he'd always say, hey, you want to go running? And I'd be like, no, why would I want to do that? That don't sound like any fun. So one day, one of my friends shamed me into going. He said, let's go run and show him how to run. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, he runs every day. And they're like, come on, let's go show the old man how to run. And I'm like, all right, let's go. So I was like, Dad, we're going with you today. And he's like, okay, come on. So we start running, and my dad always tells the story. He says, the further we got, every block or so, one of my friends would drop off. They'd be like, I'm done. And he said, in the end, I was the only one that was still with him.
Oh, wow.
And I had made it, a couple of miles. I think it was like 2 miles or something like that. But that was, I think I was about 12 years old. So that was 1978.
Wow.
And then I started coming home from school every day and running, a mile or 2 miles on my own. And then a friend of his came over to my house one night, and he goes, there's a 10K this Saturday at the local mall. And this is when I lived in Gadsden, Alabama. He said, you should come run it. And I said, well, how far is a 10K? He said, 6 miles. And I was like, I can't run 6 miles. I said, I've never run more than 2. He says, you can do it. He said, he kind of told me what to do for the rest of the week. He's like, do 3 miles this day and, rest the day before, and was giving me all these instructions.
Right.
And I showed up, and this was in May of 1979, and I ran that 10K, and I ran 48:49. And the main reason he wanted me to run it is because I was 13 years old, and my age group was 13 and under, and I won my age group.
Oh,
and,
nice.
13-year-old kid winning a trophy, I thought that was the greatest thing in the world.
Right.
I could care less now about a trophy, but then being 13 years old, you're like, I used to have to play, the whole baseball or basketball season to get this one trophy like everybody else on the team got, like the participation trophy. And I got a trophy in one day, and I'm like, this running thing's pretty cool. And next thing I know, I'm 2 years later, I'm training for my first marathon. Just real interested in the long distance, and of course, I always felt like I was too slow to be a competitive like high school runner or even a collegiate runner. I never did any of that. So I got interested in ultras early on, and partially because my dad, but my mom also got me a runner's log in 1979. That's why I know how many races I've run to this day,
Right.
and how many ultras I've run. She's passed away now, but she got me a log, and she encouraged me to start keeping up with my mileage. So I can tell you to this day, I've logged over 115,000 miles.
Yeah.
I can tell you I've run 207 ultras. I can tell you I've run 86 marathons. I can tell you,
wow,
1,370 races total.
Wow.
Since 1979, because she encouraged me to start logging everything. It's not important to me anymore, but I still do it. It's something to do. I always say when I die, they'll throw all that stuff away. But it's something to keep up with.
That's cool, man. That's such an awesome story, because I used to coach high school cross country at this all Jewish school here in Atlanta, and it was more just kind of helping out, keep the kids, like nobody's winning state. Like I think our PR for our fastest runner at the end of the season on 5K was like, in the high 17s, which is great. But obviously, like you're saying, you're not winning like a state championship or anything like that. But one thing I've noticed is now, like when you're telling me back in the day, if you will, is, hey, kids running 10Ks and all this stuff. We see all this as a society. I feel like we see all this stuff of us trying to limit potential and trying to like slow down or don't run that far. You're going to hurt your knees and all that stuff. When personally, I think nothing could be further from the truth. Like we really need people like your dad, like you, putting on events and acting as mentors to be like, let's get out there, let's push the limits, let's see how fast you can go, how far you can go. It's like not everyone is going to be winning every race. You're not going to PR at every event, but it's like, let's get out there and push yourselves. And I feel like we've lost a lot of that grittiness of, just getting out there, getting dirty, you fall down, you get up. And, and that's one thing I want to commend you for is that, when you put on an event, like you were saying, is like maybe you'll pave the way for other people to do stuff. Is you never know when you set that domino effect, what's going to fall, No,
you don't. And it's, again, I was just there were no races in the state of Alabama longer than a marathon. So I wanted to go beyond the marathon, and there were no trail races. Can you imagine that? There was no trail races in the state of any distance.
Wow.
None. I was mostly just reading about trail races, and I honestly thought Monte Sano State Park was too small because it's not a big park, So I was like, I had to struggle to get 31 miles. If you look at the course even today, it's twisting and turning and And to get this, I also thought it was going to be too easy, but that wasn't the case. It's got some good climbs in it and some rocky sections. I think it's a fun race. I use my resources is what I did, and it's a pretty famous race now. I think it's sixth largest ultra or 50K last year, maybe in the U.S.
Wow. Well, you guys take in what 500 people, and every year it sells out. I mean, it's huge, and like you said, I mean, for me, I've run Mountain Mist, I think 3, maybe 4 times. But I think I've registered like 8 times, and like the last 2 years it's just frustrating for me.
Well, the run bum always registers, and if he's not running it, he's at least out cutting down trees.
There you go. Well, maybe this year. So no, I love the race, and you hit on the why is this event so great? Why is the course so great? It has that mix of everything, and to people like us, and again, not saying we're above or anything than anyone else, but we've run some very, very hard things, and I think Mountain Mist is that perfect mix of easy and hard. Like you have everything in there. You have technical, you have runnable downhill, you have steep uphill, you have undulating, you have views, and you have like amazing community that comes behind it. Like this year I was at an helping out with an aid station, and the folks that I were with, they had been doing the same aid station for I think 10 years now.
Over
So
10 years. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. The people that do my second aid station, he's been doing it for over 20.
wow,
I had a guy that did aid station 1 and 6 because, they're real close. So they're one, and then they move a little ways, and then they're the last aid station. He did it for 20 years, and then he basically died. And that's one of the reasons he was an older guy. He was an ex-Marine, but and then a guy named Josh Kennedy, he ran 10 Mount Mist.
wow.
And got his jacket, and then he took over the aid station after Grady passed away. So now he's had that 1 and 6. So there's only been, in 29 years, there's only been 2 crew leaders of aid station 1 and 6.
Now, was that the old? Because I remember running it. So that's like that rest shelter, I believe it's called. Yep.
Rest Shelter Hill.
So the last aid station, and I'll never forget. They're like everybody talking about it all course, like, oh, if you feel bad, the guy's got beer for you at the last. He's got Yingling for you, and I definitely have had one with him there.
Yeah, and Grady started that, and he started that, the old ex-Marine, and of course then Josh has carried it on now. It started, he was also a hunter, so he used to make venison chili, and he would have chili at that aid station because it's cold and they're out there all day. And of course, Grady and all his old buddies were out there getting lit, drinking beer all day. And of course now it's just tradition, so I actually buy beer and I send it with the supplies out there to that aid station. And so they go through a lot of beer. And this lady named Mona always makes chili for them. She's not even at the aid station, but she makes chili, so they got stuff to eat because they're out there all day long.
That's awesome.
But yeah, all my aid stations are, a guy named Brent Wren's been doing the second aid station for over 20 years. And of course, the people you were with, they've been doing it for over 10. Yeah, and then my aid station on Monte Santa Boulevard, it's been going through it's had changes every year lately. It just, I had a brand new guy there this year, a young guy, so it was kind of good to get some new blood in there. Yeah, I always wondered how long am I going to race direct the race, because sometimes I feel like you need somebody like yourself, some new blood, somebody with some different ideas. But at the same time, after 29 years, I've kind of got it down. And the race had record number of finishers this year, 411 finishers, most we've ever finished. So, I guess as long as I'm in good shape and able, I should probably continue directing it. Why not?
Well, I'm glad you answered that, because that was going to be one of my questions. Like, okay, obviously January 2024, we're going into the 30th edition of it, and you're going to direct that. It's like, are you going to call it at 30 or just keep going as long as you can?
Right now, I don't see any reason to quit. It's kind of like, you've been around the race enough to know we talk about Dwayne Satterfield a lot. Yeah. And Dwayne, of course, me and him were real good buddies. He was my training partner a lot in the 90s. We ran a lot of miles together on Mount Mist before there was ever a Mount Mist. And he told me, he said, if you put a race on, he said, I'm going to run it every year. And, of course, he won the first Mount Mist. He ended up winning Mount Mist 9 times.
Wow.
He ran the first 25 Mount Mists. On the 26th Mount Mist, of course, he was lying in bed dying of cancer, and he ended up dying 3 months after the race, which was crazy. But he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He ran Mount Mist. He said he was going to run it as long as he was able every year, and he ran 25 of them. So, I kind of feel like I should kind of do the same thing. I should continue race directing Mount Mist as long as I'm able. Why should I not do it?
My vote is yes. My vote is keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm only 57.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not that old, so I'm gonna keep doing it unless, I don't see me not doing it right now.
Yes, that's awesome. So let's talk.
I enjoy it.
Good. I mean, for me, I've been race directing 11, maybe 12 years, if you want to call it that. And I think if you get past 10 years and you still have the desire to do it, then I think that you're going to keep with it. I'm like, 10 years of some races, let's keep going,
It's harder on you because you're directing a lot more races. I used to direct a lot of other races. I directed the Rocket City Marathon and some other races, but I'm only doing Mountain Mist now. I've literally gotten rid of every other race. It's more stressful for what you're doing because you're doing more races. So, but I'm only having to do one race. Surely I can do one race a year.
There you go. So let's talk about, if you don't mind, Dwayne. I just, man, what a absolute amazing human. I've met Dwayne a handful of times, so to call him like a good friend would not be true at all. I think he had run Cloudman Canyon that I put on like one time. I had seen him many times at races. At least started with him a couple times at Mountain Mist. He was a larger than life guy. Nobody had anything bad to say about him. You can't. He's just a, perfect, amazing human. But what I want to know about Dwayne is, let's talk about Dwayne in the early days of Mountain Mist, because Dwayne was a competitor. He never just showed up to Mountain Mist just to run. Like, he was racing all out. And to me, it seemed like training all year just for Mountain Mist, which I think is amazing.
Well, he lived, Mountain Mist, some of those trails were basically in his backyard. Like he could run from his house and be on those trails in no time. So he had a huge home course advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we ran a lot together in the 90s, and I was already running ultras, and he was not. And I persuaded him to run the Birmingham Track Club 50 miler. They used to have a road race. It was a 50 miler in Oak Mountain State Park. They still have the Oak Mountain 50K now, which is a trail run.
Right.
But they used to have a 50-mile run. It was a road race. It was a 12.5-mile loop, and you ran it 4 times. And I persuaded him to run that. And I told him if he'd just run this one race and then tell me what he thought. And after he ran Birmingham Track Club 50 miler, it was in the 90s. He was like, I'm addicted. I love it. I love it. But, of course, then I got him out on the trails as well. And that dude had rubber ankles. I've never seen anybody run on that. There's a section called Old Railroad Bed.
Okay.
Mountain Mist. It comes at about 21 miles. And it's literally an old railroad bed from an old railroad they had back in the 1940s that used to take guests up to Montesano to an old hotel up there. It's gone now. It burned down years ago. But that was what they did. They would ride this train, so that trail was still there. And his ankles would roll over. And I swear, it looked like they would be hitting the grounds. And not only would he not break stride, he wouldn't even break conversation. I would be sitting there going, that would break my ankles. I mean, they would just flap over on the ground and just hit. And I'd be like, holy smokes, how did he do that? So Mountain Mist would roll around. Where do you think he put his move on the competition every year? 21 miles.
Right.
When he hit a railroad bed. Everybody would be tiptoeing through those rocks. He'd drop the hammer and he'd be gone. And he was a super competitive dude. I mean, me and him back in the early days, the competition wasn't what it is today. Like, there's a lot more competition in ultra running than there was back in the 90s. So when we would go to races in the Southeast, it was either me or him were going to win the race. We'd get to the race and it was like, who's going to win today? And some races we'd stay together the whole way. We couldn't break one another.
That's awesome.
But sometimes it's good friends where he couldn't stand for me to beat him though. Sometimes it was hilarious. Of course, we were younger then, and then as we aged, he could care less who was beating him. But at Mount Mist, it was a different ball game. He felt like it was home course. I wasn't going to be running, so he didn't have to fool with me. I was directing, and he got 9 wins. And I used to I tried to bring in some big guns to race him sometimes.
Right.
Eric Clifton, I got him. I
wow.
remember a guy named Eric Clifton came and ran. There was a guy named Courtney Campbell. He and Mike Morton used to win a lot of races in the Southeast. In fact, Mike Morton ended up winning Western States.
Mike Morton's the man. I've met him a couple times.
The man, yeah. But Morton and Courtney Campbell used to be attached to the hip, and they used to win a lot of hundreds. But I got Courtney to come run Mount Mist, and Dwayne beat him. He finished second because he had that home course advantage. Wow. There was another fellow that I brought in from Colorado. I can't even think of Dave Mackey.
Dave Mackey, yeah.
Dave Mackey, before he lost part of his leg.
Yeah.
He was tough, and he didn't beat Dwayne his first time here.
Wow.
And Dave, he couldn't believe it. He didn't even. I think he didn't finish 10th after leading the race for the first 26 miles.
Right.
On course record pace.
Wow.
And then McKay Hollow happened.
Then he passed.
He fell apart, McKay, and I think I think Dwayne ended up winning that year, but of course Courtney came back the next year and broke the course record, believe it or not. Of course, Dave Mackey did because Dave was tough. But I brought in some pretty good runners to try to duel with Dwayne, and he still managed to get 9 wins.
That's awesome. I always think it's so cool. And one of my favorite parts about race directing, I do events like all throughout the Southeast, but I started off with kind of a chip on my shoulder when we first did GDR. Was like I would go to races, and I know you can relate to this. You go out west, and people are like, "Oh, you guys don't have real mountains over there,"
Mm-hmm.
And so,
oh yeah,
and so I really like it. Tickles me when I'm able to get people from out west or even in New England or wherever it might be, just not from the Southeast, to come down in the South and run these events, or if they come to, say Mountain Mist, and it's like, there is that, internal chuckle and kind of smile, like, when somebody gets a little broken on one of our courses and be like, yep, yep, yep.
Oh, it happened at Mountain Mist plenty. I had some West Coasters come over here and run and thinking they were going to win or something, and not only were they not winning, sometimes they were DNFing.
Right.
I didn't know it was going to be this rocky.
Well, I always call like Mountain Mist, it's kind of like the siren song. So, we haven't, if people are listening to this or watching this and they don't know anything about Mountain Mist, hey, you got to run this race. This is hands down the best. I've said this publicly many times. This is the best 50K on the entire East Coast. And I can say that without a shadow of a doubt. Like it's 100%. And it's great because it's a very runnable course, but then there's also a lot of hard stuff, heavy weighted on the back end. So what I love is you start and finish on top of the mountain, right? So no matter what, you're going down, and then at the very end, you're having to come back up. So multiple times actually, right? So people go out really fast, and the first 17 or so miles is a huge net downhill, and there's really not much major climbing, so it's so easy to blow your legs up. And then the second half gets lots up and down, very technical. So it's like now you've blown your legs up, you've gone at a pace that's probably too quick for what you've been training for, but you're like, it feels so good. The siren song just calling you in to, come beckoning you to come towards the rocks in your ship. And then most people, when they hit waterline, they just kind of crash and burn. You know how it goes.
Well, I was telling you about some of these. Hal Kerner, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
He won Western States before.
Correct. Twice.
He didn't finish Mountain Mist.
Oh wow. Oh no.
I don't remember if he rolled an ankle in that land trust on those rocky sections, but he probably killed me if I told you. But yeah, he came to Mountain Mist once, and he got a DNF out of it.
Yeah, it happens, man. Yeah.
You think, how do you drop out of a 50K? That's too short. But Mountain Mist, you hit a rock the wrong way, it can put you on the ground.
Well, and that's my favorite part about ultra running is that like you can run countless ultra marathons, and you could have run 100 milers, 200 milers, run across America, and then you show up to a 50K, whether it's Mountain Mist or something else, and then you get 15 miles in and you DNF because that's just the way it goes. I mean, the finish is never guaranteed. Like it's not a 5K. I've gotten to where was it? Was it Stump Jump? Some race I ran one year, and I was so tired. And this was back in the day when I was younger, in my early 20s. I was hungover, and I was like, I need to go to sleep. I got to the first aid station, Dink, and I stopped and took a nap. I said, wake me up 5 minutes before the cutoff time. They're like, and I literally took a nap, woke up, was like, whoa, okay, and then took off and just started running the race and felt completely fine. So it's like any given Sunday, right? It's like anything can happen.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. And Stump Jump's no joke. That thing's pretty hilly. I think I had one of my slower 50Ks there, but when you get to my age, I've been running for 45 years now, and it's a sad story, but like every ultra I go to now, my goal is not to have a personal worst.
Oh, okay.
It's a sad story. Like I said, it's used to, I could go knock these 50Ks out and run them in my sleep.
Right.
The older I get, the faster I was. So now, like every time I go to race, my goal is to not be a personal worst. So you young folks out there, when you get older, it's coming.
It's
I never dreamed I would even live to be 50 years old, much less 57. You know, when you're in your 20s, you're thinking 50 sounded so old to me at one time.
What do you feel like as you've gotten older? What do you see? Is it harder to recover for you, or you feel like you're losing speed, motivation, like, what?
Well, here's the deal. When you get 35 years old, you start losing 1.5 to 2% of your VO2 max every year. So I'm 57. You do the math there and see how much VO2 max I've lost. I feel like I'm still running with that same effort, but the problem is the watch don't lie. It tells
Right.
you how slow you're going. And it's just mind-boggling for me. You know, and when I was 34, again, in my prime, I ran my best marathon, ran a 240, 6:07 pace
Wow.
on the road, 6:07 pace for a marathon. And I can't even do that for a 5K now. Can't even run a 5K at 6:07 pace. And it boggles my mind because I used to run sub 3 hour marathons in my sleep. Like I could roll out of bed any day of the week and go run a sub 3. Them days are gone. I can't. Last time I broke 3 hours in the marathon was the day in Boston when they had the bombs went off.
Oh, wow.
Remember the bombings?
Yeah.
Last sub 3 hour marathon
Wow.
that day. Ran a sub 3 that day, and now there's just no way. It's just age. There's nothing you can do about it. You lose that VO2 max. So now I just run. My goal is just get to see new trails, perhaps. Try to feel halfway decent. It's you can't breathe as well as you could when you were younger either. It blows my mind how I struggle to breathe on a run now. Like it's harder to relax, and I think it's just age. But it's bound to happen.
Now, do you that I you know I'm kind of trying to, like you were saying, like all in our 20s and 30s, kind to try to ignore what's inevitably going to happen if we're as fortunate to live that long, which is
Right.
getting older and slower and stuff like that. And my question is, as you realize that's happening, are you, obviously you're very competitive with running and stuff, are you chasing like age group stuff now, or do you just kind of go out there and just doing it to do it?
Well, you do. I never thought about age group stuff. I still, even when I was like 47, I still hadn't quite thrown the towel in yet because I won Mount Cheehaw 50K when I was 47 years old, and actually ran my best time at Cheehaw. And this next Saturday, it'll be the 18th annual. I've run them all, and
Are you
I'll
running?
be out there. Oh yeah,
I'm running too. I'll see you there.
I saw your name on the list, but I've been battling tendonitis. 45 years of running, I've never had tendonitis. I've had it in my left ankle since October. Worst injury I've ever had. Is it age related? Is it because I've run 115,000 miles? I don't know.
Right.
It's my only goal for Cheehaw is going to be to finish the darn thing, and I'll tape that ankle up and tape my arch because it just kills you if you pronate at all. It hurts.
Oh.
But I plan to be out there. I mean, I'm not going to just throw in the towel. But your goals do change. You become more of an age grouper when you get, especially after 50. I really didn't notice it till I got after 55. It's when I feel like all my struggles have started with, like, why am I getting so slow? And you just got to have different goals. And have you run Mount Cheehaw?
I've run it one time. It was honestly like probably my second favorite 50K besides Mountain Mist.
It's my favorite 50K.
Yeah. Here, hold on. Let me turn that off. I don't know how that.
Yeah, I absolutely love Mount Cheehaw 50K. It is, to me, it's the best trails in Alabama. Everybody, it's not Mountain Mist, but you're getting to run point to point. You're getting to run to the highest point in Alabama.
That's right.
The trails are just way more runnable to me than Mountain Mist. You're trading climb, and
Right.
you got the Chenevee Falls. It's just gorgeous, man. You're in the Talladega National Forest. I absolutely love that race.
I just love it. It's point to point. Like you're obviously going the opposite way of the Pinhoti 100. I think Todd and Jamie do an amazing job with it. They had another race I ran, it's the Rockin' Chocoloco. I just did the half marathon.
And I haven't done that one yet.
Yeah, it was really hot when they had it. I think they've moved that now. Um,
They have moved it. They are moving it, but it could still be hot because
yeah,
it's
I
going to
mean
be.
it's Alabama. You
Yeah, it's
know,
the end of April. I think they're changing it to the end of
right
April,
on.
maybe.
Yeah,
Still going to be hot.
no, Chiha is great. It actually, when I ran it, it really surprised me of how hilly it was. Like, and I think it was really just on that first half because I'd done Blue Hell. I'd
Mhm.
paced people through like Pinhoti multiple times. I remember actually paced the person I was going to pace at Pinhoti because I kind of alternate. Like, I try to volunteer or pace somebody every year at Pinhoti. Um, and anyways, I had gone to pace, and the person I paced, they dropped out like early in the race. So they rolled their ankle, and they were going for like top three. And I was sitting there, I guess at the start of Silent Trail, and I was like, people were coming through. I saw Johnny Clemens. I was like, which is, by the way, is the Southeastern trail running supermodel, by the way, if any women are
I know
interested.
Johnny well. He
Yeah.
ran fast at Cheehaw that year. I think he went like 4:22. He was fast.
Yeah, so he comes through on Pinhoti, and then ended up jumping in to pace Liz Canty. So I got to see all that basically in the daylight, and I was like, "This is amazing." And then I think after that, I went back and ran Chiaha and didn't realize how much climbing there was on that front end. It's relentless. It's beautiful
Hey,
though.
you're climbing right out of the start.
Yeah.
I mean, your single track trail, smooth, nice trails.
Yes.
It's you know where Blue Hell got its name, don't you?
Just from all the blazes, right?
So the very first Cheehaw, me and this guy, we were duking it out. We ran the first, I think, 26 miles together, and he was a cross country runner for the University of Alabama,
Okay.
and he was a 14-minute 5K guy, and he basically sat on my shoulder for 26 miles, and then he took off and. There's a dirt road section, and he blasted it. I mean, he just used some of that speed and left me, and he ended up beating me by like 2 or 3 minutes. It wasn't much. But then after the race, Todd was like, "Hey, I want you to write an article for the race." And so I wrote an article, and in that article, it was for Ultra Running Magazine. I talked about going up the big climb, and I said, and from this moment on, it will forever be known as Blue Hell.
That's awesome.
So that's where Blue Hell came from, was from the first Mount Cheehaw.
So
Because
you
it was
named
just,
it.
I named it. That's right. It had blue blazes going all the way up, as you know well. And it was straight freaking up at the end of a 50K, and
Yeah.
it was hell. And I was like, that thing is Blue Hell. That's what that is. It was Blue Hell, and
Yeah.
the name stuck, and that's where Blue Hell came from. Was the very first Mount Cheehaw 18 years ago.
That's
It was pretty.
awesome. Yeah, I love I actually love that dirt road section because all of a sudden you've been doing all this undulating up and down, and then you pop out and you're like, whatever it was, it 2 miles, maybe a mile
It's
and a half.
only 1 mile.
It's one.
Everybody thinks it's two, but it's just one. It's
It
1 mile on dirt road.
and it's if you just went and ran that by itself, it's flat. But I think there's just like the most gradual of inclines, and
I don't know. Yeah, that thing's rough. It's got a little hill to it, I think. But that's where that guy took off and left me in the first Mount Cheehaw because he had that speed. And if you've got anything when you hit that dirt road, that's where you use it because you got a mile on the dirt road. Then you actually have a mile of pavement. I don't know if anybody realizes that, but there's 1 mile of pavement.
That's right. That's right.
There's a mile of pavement over to the state park, and then of
By
course,
the lake.
then you go up Blue Hell.
Yeah,
From the
and
lake.
if people haven't done it before, like the normal amount of blazing on any trails, like painted blazes, this has about 10 times that. It's like
Yeah,
literally every other tree has one, and
yeah.
somehow still I'll watch people. I'm like, where are you going? Like this is just
Well, you have to because it gets so rocky up there. If you can't see the blue blazes, you don't know where to go.
yeah.
It is pretty awesome though. I love that section.
And I think it's like I was kind of mapping it out just to prep for next week, just to in my mind to get in. And I think it's like it's 100 feet per tenth of a mile, so like basically
That's about
1,000
right.
feet per mile, that is serious climbing right there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's about 100 per tenth. It might even be 1,008 tenths. Because if you
Wow.
notice, Blue Hill starts out flat
Right.
for about the first tenth or two, it's kind of
Yeah, that's
flat.
right.
And then I think you go up and climb about 1,008 tenths.
Right.
But like I said, it's 100 per tenth on average, but it's straight freaking up that thing.
Well, and I remember when I got up to the top of it, like, I'm talking to all these people and, I'm like, oh, I remember the top of this. And I remember at Pinhoti, I think they moved the aid station, but whatever aid station was up in that parking lot, to whatever Bald Knob or Bald Rock Overlook.
Bald Rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Bald Rock.
In my mind, it's like, that's where the finish line is. It's not. Like there's another mile or two past that. So I'm like, okay, like I'm running this and I'm like, okay, where's the finish line? And then we pop back on a trail. I was like,
just remember next week when you're running, when you get up to the top of Blue Hill, you're going to turn right on the road.
Oh, okay.
You're going to run the road about a half mile over to the motel, the Cheehaw Motel.
Right.
You're going to make a left and you're going to get on the Cheehaw Express, which is a mountain bike trail.
Ah, okay.
And you got to run that trail you still got about 2 miles to the finish.
Right.
Yeah, and it winds and twists and turns, and you're going to be like, where is that freaking finish line? But it's at least 2 more miles once you get up to the top.
So here's a crazy, and again, what an awesome race. It's like, what was it like to the top of Alabama? Because
Ice Point, Alabama. Yeah.
That's right, Cheehaw. And I want to ask you about Blue Hell, and then we'll also kind of maybe talk about that in reference to Waterline and like the last 2 climbs at Mountain Mist. The people who are winning these races, like if you're winning Cheehaw or you're winning Mountain Mist, are you running all of that?
I know for a fact. So get this. I know I won Cheehaw when I was 47.
Okay.
When I got to the bottom of Blue Hell, I was in 3rd place.
Oh, wow.
I was in 3rd, and all day long, I'd get to an aid station. I'd be like, where's the next guy? 5 minutes. That's what they kept telling me every aid station. 5 minutes, 5 minutes. I'm like, I'm going to finish 3rd because, you get to the bottom of Blue Hell, you're
not making
3 miles from the finish or whatever.
Right.
You got a mile up and then 2 miles to the finish. I was like, I'm going to finish 3rd today. Well, I get to that last aid station at Chinnaby Lake or whatever, and I'm about to go up Blue Hell. Well, I see 2nd place leaving the aid station. Oh, I'm catching that dude. I said, where's the leader? They said, 5 minutes. And I'm like, all right, so I'm going to finish 2nd because I'm going to catch this guy that's in 2nd. I just saw him. I go to Blue Hell. I walk every step of Blue Hell. I'm in the lead when I get to the top. And
wow.
5 minutes, and I walked every step.
Wow.
That means you just got to be walking at a good pace.
That's right.
Blue Hell. Yeah, nobody's running Blue Hell. And even one year, talking about Mountain Mist and Waterline, which is a similar, I think Blue Hell's worse.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Blue Hell's worse than Waterline. Waterline is bad, and it does surprise people. They don't realize they're going to encounter something like Waterline.
Right.
But David Riddle, we didn't talk about Riddle. Riddle won Mountain Mist 10 times.
Right.
And then he didn't come back this year. He ran it 11 times. He won it 10. He's also got the course record 3:36, which is insane.
I can't even fathom that.
It's sub 7 minute pace. It's sub 7 minute pace at Mountain Mist. Insane. But I, as a race director, parked right there where Monte Sano Boulevard. I walked down to the bottom of Blue Hell, waited on Riddle, and I tried to go up with him. I couldn't keep up with him.
Wow.
He was running. I mean, he was.
Oh, you mean rolling. The bottom of Waterline?
Bottom of Waterline.
Yeah.
Where it's runnable.
Right.
And he motored up there. And I don't know what he looked like going on up because he left me. But I was just trying to see if I could keep up with him with fresh legs.
Right.
But it was also the day he ran the 3:36, which, sub 7 minute pace. That dude could motor.
So let's talk about Riddle and Mountain Mist. I mean, you can't mention Mountain Mist and people running fast, like Dwayne. I credit Dwayne with being like the original guy that was really pushing it, the competitor, right? And as we talked about earlier, but David Riddle just, oh my gosh, that guy is taking it to the next level. And it's like every year I see all these guys gunning for him, and they're really fast people like Kyle Boykin, Nathan Holland, like all these guys. And, Riddle is, so first of all, he's very tall, right? So I got to tell you a quick Riddle story, and then I want to talk about him at Mountain Mist, because I
Okay.
actually ran with him for about a half mile one year, because I just wanted to see how he ran. And but I was down in the Virgin Islands, okay, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and they have this race called 8 Tough Miles, and they spell it TUFF, 8 Tough Miles, and it's a road race. But I'm gonna tell you right now, Dink, if you ever get a chance, it's the most brutal and beautiful road race you've ever run. It's like, there's like 2,000 feet of climbing at least, and like I believe in 8 miles, and it's the grades of the road are, I mean, it's like 40% grade roads basically.
Is it as bad as your Brasstown ball?
Way worse. But it's got up. Brasstown just goes up. This, you start at one side of the island and you run direct, like from one side to the other, and there's just like this. And
Mm,
they shut the road down for it. It's really cool. And
that
I
sounds
remember
cool.
showing up to the start line, and the big deal is like breaking an hour. Like they give you like a little pin. They're like, here you go. Here's a
That's
pin.
7:30 pace for 8 miles.
Yeah, and I did, and I was excited because I did it, and like I looked at his time for 8 miles. I think he was like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I mean,
Ooh,
he set a course record, and there's thousands of people that would run this race, and I'm like, yo, this guy's from Ohio. Like, I guess there was a big group of them, and I talked to him for a little bit after the race, like, how do you train for something like this in Ohio? And he's just like, oh, it's just kind of, I've just been on the, I'm like, and this was when he was doing the like the 100K World Championships and stuff like that, which this is so out in left field compared to that. I mean, that guy has my full respect. Um, but going back to seeing and running with him at Mountain Mist, like a couple times when I started Mountain Mist, I would just go out sprinting, because it funneled you into, a single track trail. Like, oh, nobody
yeah.
knows who I am. I'll go out here and just kind of run for a mile, half mile, and bomb the first downhill, and then kind of lay back a little bit and just, walk a little bit and just have a good time, right? I wanted to see how this guy ran. So I ran a little bit, got up, slowed down. I mean, I was sprinting, okay?
Yeah.
And his legs are so long, and his stride
He
is
has a long shot.
a long stride. Now, what's insane is you watch most runners and people who care about getting hurt, they shorten their stride, when they go uphill or when they're running over something technical. He did not do that. He
No,
just
he
kept the
doesn't.
full stride the whole time. I mean, it's incredible.
Riddle's an interesting character. So I knew Riddle when he was in high school. He lived in Madison, which is right next to Huntsville. And he went to Bob Jones High School where he ran cross country, and I would see him at meets. And he was just an okay high school runner. He wasn't great. So then he goes to Auburn University where he walked on
Wow.
the track cross country. He walked on. And he really improved while he was at Auburn. Well, of course, growing up in this area, he knew me and he knew about Mountain Mist. And he told me, he's like, when I get done with college and everything, he said, I'm going to start running Mountain Mist, by the way. Yeah, and I was like, all right, come on. But while he was at Auburn, he got pretty darn fast. And I think he got his 10K down in that, under 31-minute range for 10K.
Wow.
When you start getting wheels like that, 5-minute pace for 10K, to me, that always translates to a fast trail runner if you do the work and do the training. If you've got those kind of wheels, you can go on a trail. Some road guys don't ever do well on trail, but then there's others that it goes right onto the trail and they carry that same leg turnover. And he runs the trails, like you said, long stride. Well, he comes to Mount Miss, he starts dominating the darn thing. And I was just glad to be able to see him do so well, at Mount Mist. So Mount Mist would give him then of course, then he ended up, his wife got an internship in Cincinnati. He moved there. And but coming here gave him a chance to see his parents and, of course, run Mountain Mist. So that was some of the ties to Mountain Mist, was that he's really from this area, not even though he's been in Cincinnati for quite a while now. And what's funny about Riddle, too, is he claims he's not 100 miles is not his jam. Like, he's like, I just can't run 100 miles, which is not true. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we went to JFK one year, and he ended up winning JFK. We had a little team. You know how you can have little teams at
Right.
JFK.
Right.
And I think it was me and him and Dwayne and another guy. I think that's who was on our team. But anyway, he ended up winning JFK, and
Wow.
it was a golden ticket race. So he got into Western.
I remember that.
And I paced him at Western. I was his pacer at Western.
Oh, that's cool.
And he ran 16:50 in his first 100. His first 100 was Western States. And he goes 16:50 something. He tries to say he's not good at running hundreds. And I'm like, he's also got the course record at Penn still.
Yes.
Yeah. He still has the course record at Penn. But I always think it's funny that he says hundreds are not his jam. Oh, he's got a course record at Penn. He did 16:50. Granted, he got lucky at Western. I'm going to tell you why. I was standing there waiting on him at Forest Hill. It's 50-something degrees at Forest Hill. It was that year.
Right.
It was the year they had like perfect weather. And of course, he tore it up. He was awesome. I mean, we got to the track and he like sprinted the last 400 at Western. He was flying.
Wow.
He ended up finishing 11th that day, but
that's awesome.
He's got a lot of talent. Of course, he's a family man now. He's got 3 kids. He's an engineer. His wife's a doctor. 3 kids, and he's still running really well. I think one of the reasons he didn't come to Mount Miss this year, I think it's just because he's injured.
Oh, man.
Because I look at him on Strava, and he told me after he won that 10th Mount Miss that he thought he would be done. But then like 2 or 3 days later, he goes, I'm thinking about doing a double Mount Miss. Have you ever heard of doing a double at Mount Miss?
Right.
There's a few people that
start before.
Yeah, they start before, run the course, and then they run the race. And he was talking about doing that. He wanted to see if he could run the race and then do a second loop before the last finisher.
Oh.
He would have 9.5 hours to do it.
I bet he could easily do that.
I think he could potentially do it, but I think he's been having some injury issues or something. So I didn't hear from him. I mean, I sent him a message, and I never heard back from him from Mount Miss this year. But I'm not going to count him out yet. But, I mean, if he stops at 10 wins, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's a pretty good little record there at Mount Miss. Between him and Dwayne, there's 19 of the 29 wins right there.
Wow.
Them two have 19 of them.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, Riddle's got a good background. I mean, he ran at Auburn University. Again, he was a walk-on, but he got real good while he was down at Auburn.
So we were talking about Western States. I know you've done Western States. How many times have you done Western States?
I finished it. I think I finished it in. I don't remember the years, but the last time I did it, I was probably in my earlier 40s. First time I ever did it, it took me 28 hours. At the time, I thought that was horrible. And I had some DNFs at Western States. You're talking about nothing's ever guaranteed at an ultra.
Right.
I've got some DNFs, but nothing below 100 miler. All my DNFs come in 100 milers.
Wow.
50 Ks, 50 milers, 100 Ks. I always manage to get to the finish, but 100 milers, those things are not ever a guarantee, especially living here and then going out there and running in all that heat and all that that we don't even. Yeah, we got some hills here, but we don't have those sustained ups and downs like Western States has. You need to be out there training on that course. But I did do it 28 hours the first time, and then the second time I finished that hour was 23 hours.
Wow.
So I did break 24 once. So I got a gold buckle, a silver one and a bronze one. So one over 24 and one under. So I got one each. And I've had some DNFs. One year I was there, and man, it's still to this day, I had a horrible pacer is what it came down to. I made it to Rucky Chucky. Are you familiar with Western?
Very familiar.
I got to Rucky Chucky, which is 78 miles, and the sun was still shining.
Wow.
Sun still shining. And I got up to Green Gate, and it was starting to get dark. And so that's 80 miles. So I had 20 to go, and it's just now getting dark. Well, I started throwing up. Well, you know how that goes.
Yep. Once you start.
I threw up from 80 to 85 at Auburn Lakes, and my pacer was like, you need to quit, man. You need to quit. You need to quit. He ended up talking me into quitting. I probably could have walked in and still been under 20 hours that day.
Wow.
Which still pisses me off.
Oh.
I mean, this was back during the Ann Trayson days. I spent
a lot of time
with Ann Trayson that day. We ran a lot of miles together that day. She ended up leaving me somewhere in the canyons, I think, but I should have never quit. I mean, even the year I got the 23 hours, I was in my 40s. I threw up the last 20 miles that day. I mean, I got to Rucky Chucky. I started throwing up. I sat there for a little while, and I'm like, I ain't going to get to the finish sitting here. So I crossed the water, and that was back when they still were weighing people. They used to have
I
weigh-ins.
remember. Oh, they don't do that anymore.
They don't do that anymore.
Oh, wow.
I literally, my pacer was filling up my water bottle and putting it in the back of my shorts so I could make the weigh-ins. He would fill up 1 or 2 bottles because I would get to the aid station, eat, drink, go 100 yards down the trail, throw up, and then struggle to the next aid station. And I did that whole process the last 20 miles. And I still got in 23 something. I mean, throwing up was 20. But you can make it if you're throwing up. I mean, it's.
That heat though is like, I mean, from what I've run a lot in the desert, never 100 miles in the desert, and it's like, in warm times of year, you go out there and it's like, oh, I mean, us coming from the south where it's so humid, it's like it's
different.
Just sucks the moisture out of your body,
It's horrible, and
Horrible.
we can't prepare for that.
Nope.
I can remember being in the canyons, and there was a park ranger on a horse down there, and he had this ginormous thermometer on it. And I can remember seeing it was like 112, 115 in the canyons, man. And that kind of heat will do a number on your stomach, or at least it would mine.
Oh, yeah.
I've never been much of a heat runner. I do better in cold weather. Cold weather's my jam. I mean, I ran Tunnel Hill year before last, 20 something degrees, and then it was high 40, and then it was in snow flurries at night, and I ran great. Didn't have any problem. 100 miles, no problem.
Always cracks me up, speaking of like weather like that, because like, I don't know, as a ginger, it's like I don't really do heat, but then I'm not flexible enough. Like my muscles in cold weather start to seize up. So it's like, I guess I'm just the perfect temperature kind of guy, but
trust me, I prefer perfect temperature too.
Yeah.
I do better in cold weather. It's just
No, I
think most people do. Even Mount Miss this year, we had record numbers. Well, look at the weather. It was what, 36 degrees at the start.
Stellar.
The high 50-ish. I mean, it's perfect. 36 to 50. That's pretty darn good weather. And it results in high finish rate.
I agree, and it's crazy to me because when I hear people talk about Mountain Mist, they're like, "Oh, well, I ran it this one year, and there was like snow and ice, or it was so cold, or I ran it one year and it was raining," and it's like, man, it's January in the South, like it's gonna be cold. So it's like anytime I've ever run it, it's either raining or really cold at the start. I mean, it warms up, and it always cracks me up. It's like why that surprises people. It's like, that's just part of it,
Well, and we're in North Alabama. I mean, we're 12 miles from the Tennessee state line.
That's
I mean,
right.
we're close to Tennessee, so we're far north Alabama. And you remember last year we had our coldest mountain.
Oh,
was it 7 degrees at the start or something?
That's right.
Yeah, 7. Yeah, 7 degrees.
That's right.
So, we had perfect weather this year. So I still think your finish rate's going to be higher with cold than it is hot.
I agree. I think it's.
You talk about that Rockin' Chocolate being warm. Todd's also has that Rebecca Mountain.
Right. You're right.
50 miler that's in September.
Oh,
and
that's gotta be hot.
That thing has a horrible finish rate every year because it's 90 and 100 degrees with the humidity of Alabama. And so that race has a horrible finish rate.
It's definitely a good training run for Pinhoti, which, as you know, that could either be cold or really hot. And, when you see it hotter at Pinhoti, like any race, obviously.
I did Pinhoti once, and I got perfect conditions.
Nice.
It was probably 32 at the start. It warmed up to probably 60s during the day. It can get kind of warm down there. It's further south.
Oh, yeah.
60s all day, low humidity, blue skies, gorgeous day. And then it got cold that night. I remember it being pretty cold, but it was about as good of weather as you could ask for. I'd rather have that than, it was warm this year at Pinhoti. I was working aid station 85.
Nice.
And, man, I think I was like not even wearing a jacket all night long.
What is that, Adams order?
What is that? It's Bulls Gap.
Bulls Gap.
Okay. And it's 85 miles. It's the last cutoff.
Yeah,
I think. And I ended up working that aid station this year, and me and a guy named Lanier Greenhall headed that aid station up. We were there from 4:30 on Saturday afternoon till 11 the next morning. That's like a 19-hour shift on an aid station.
Oh man.
But it's no sleeping. It was kind of fun though. I enjoyed it. But
you know what I love? I would just say this. I told this to a lot of people. I truly believe that the way I feel that Mountain Mist is the best 50K, hands down, Pinhoti is the best 100 miler. Uh, Possibly on the East Coast. I'm not as familiar with other stuff, but definitely in the Southeast. I recommend that to people all the time. It's just
I love it.
the course is awesome. It's point to point. It's
Mm-hmm.
again like Mountain Mist in the sense of it's like not too hard, but hard. It's beautiful. There's people that run the aid stations do it every year, and I feel like it's right around when like what is the Iron Bowl or something? Something's going on. They're watching like football somehow around the
There's
middle
a
of
lot of college
Talladega.
football. There's always
National.
college football going on.
It's like where somebody's got a satellite TV out there in their RV on like some random dirt road. I mean, it's awesome.
We actually did have the Auburn game on. They were playing. I don't remember who they were playing, but we were watching the Auburn game on Saturday night on my phone. Somehow we had signal at Bulls Gap, so I was happy about that. So we had the game on, and at 85 miles, they're so spread out anyway. We were just we had a lot of, we drank a lot of beer. We had a good time. It was a good time. Anybody that hadn't worked an aid station ought to give it a shot. I like to give back to the run community myself.
And it's so nice to kind of be on the other side of things and just like, cool, I don't have to run. I don't have to be in pain. I can just watch and go, yeah, I know how that feels. And,
Yeah.
helping folks, I love running aids. I guess my favorite thing to do is
It's fun. I enjoy it too. It's we had a good time. It was a long night.
Yeah.
But, we had Fireball and stuff at the aid station. It was all good.
So
yeah, Pinhoti is great.
A great race. Highly recommend it. It's always the first weekend in November, I believe. And so the last thing I want to talk to you about, because I think this is incredible. Obviously, I have a lot of accomplishments with running, race directing. It goes without saying, but you were telling me earlier that you're going to start this year, which will be your 37th consecutive strolling gym 40 miler.
That's correct.
And you've won it before, correct?
I won it twice. Back in the day, so I ran it for the first time in 87. I just got that issue of Ultra Runner magazine, and Strolling Gym was the weekend before. I just missed it, and I'm like, well, I'll run it next year. So I go run the race, and man, I go out there, and it's super competitive. There was guys like Steve Warshauer and Sean Crom and Charlie Trayer and Tom Zimmerman. All these guys were like 100K champions, but everybody that was fast road runners would go to Strolling Gym. And so I ran it the first year. Then I came back the next year, and I was like 5:07. Then the next year I come back, I ran 5:08. And I'd ran some with a guy named Steve Warshauer. He had went out really fast, and he crashed and burned, and he was laying on a bridge. And I come up on this bridge, and he's like laying on his back on the rail.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, just taking a little rest. It wasn't my day. And we ended up running the last 15 miles together that day.
Wow.
And that guy has run, I think he's run a 4:20 there. He's got a top 10 time at Strolling Gym now. Steve Warshauer was the man back in the day. He used to dominate every ultra in the Southeast. I mean, I think he won Leadville. I think he finished top 3 at Western back in his day. But anyway, that's where I met Gary Cantrell, Laz. And so I started going every year. And then I think it was probably 25 years old. He had a real competitive race that day, and we got some good, cool weather. Well, I'm running with this guy named Ken Brewer. Well, Ken Brewer's from Oxford, Alabama. He was 45 years old at the time. And the guy still holds the master's course record for Strolling Gym.
Wow.
Because you're not a master at Strolling Gym till you're 45. And we were running together that day, and we go through the marathon in 2:50:30. This is during an ultra now, a 40-mile race.
Wow.
We're running like barely in the top 10.
Jeez.
And Brewer starts pulling away from me. The guy's 45 years old, and I'm like, I must be falling apart. Well, long story short, he ran a 4:31 that day. That's still the master's course record, 4:31, which is around 6:35 per mile average.
And it's not flat. It's not flat.
No, there's 2,300 gain. It's a road race. That's not flat. Of course, Gary says Laz says there's 4 small hills. Yeah, they're hills, all right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I ended up running a 4:36 that day, the 6:45 pace, and I finished 7th. I was seventh overall.
Wow. That's crazy.
I was seventh.
Yeah.
And I told Gary that day, he's like, I said, I tell you what, Gary, I said, I may not always run that fast here because we did get a cool day that day, which made a big difference. I said, but I tell you what, I'll be here every year. That's what I told Laz. I said, I will be here every year. And lo and behold, as the years passed, I ended up winning it a couple of times. I still have the record for the most sub 5 hours. It's only 9.
Wow.
But you've got to average under 7-minute pace to break 5 hours. And I've done it 9. I did it 9 times.
Wow.
And now, of course, those days are long gone. Of course, Gary's still, you going to break 5 today? And I'm like, yeah, right. So now I've reached a point where I'm just looking for finishes now.
Right.
I was just over 6 hours last year, which not bad.
That's incredible.
And that was number 36. And I think I was 8:59 pace. It was just under 9-minute pace.
It's amazing.
And I know that sounds horrible, but
no,
it's just all we can do now. So now I'm just going to see if I can keep finishing it. This year will be number 37. So I've run it every year since I was 21 years old.
Wow. That's so cool. That's so cool.
It is. It's hard to wrap my mind around 37 times, but as long as I've been lucky, you've got to have some lucky to have a streak like that. Because you get injured, there's
sick, whatever, family.
Here's a funny one. One year, my daughter went to the University of Alabama, and her graduation was falling on the day of Strolling Gym.
Oh no!
Oh no, is right. First Saturday in May is graduation time.
Right.
So she's like, I'm graduating. So I'm in a panic. Her graduation's like at 1:00 on the day of Strolling Gym.
Oh no.
Or something like that. And I'm like, I messaged Laz. I said, Laz, I got a dilemma here. I said, I got to run the race, but my daughter's graduating from college, and I can't miss her graduation. I said, is there any way I can start early? He's like how early? I'm like 1 a.m. early. Like, I need to finish.
Yeah.
I'd already mapped out how long it was going to take me to drive to Tuscaloosa and all this other stuff.
Right.
Well, long story short, they changed the He okayed it. I was going to get to do it. They moved her graduation to the Friday night.
Oh, that's great.
I went to her graduation. I got home at midnight, got up at 4, drove, did Strolling Gym. I actually had a decent run that day. I ran it. Then she decided to go back and get her master's. Her graduation did fall on the Strolling Gym.
Oh, no.
And I was like, Casey, I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be at Strolling Gym. I was like, it took her 18 months to get her master's. I'm like, I don't need to go to graduation. It's a big deal for her undergrad, the 4 years. But I was like, it only took you 18 months to get that degree. I'm like, I'm going to be at Strolling Gym.
Right.
She still gives me a hard time about that.
I'm sure.
But, now it's kind of become a priority. I feel like I'm 36 straight, 37 coming up in May. I got to run it now no matter what. And I love that race. I don't know if you've ever done the gym.
I've never. I'm not a big road ultra guy.
It's my only road ultra every year now. It's
yes.
Strolling Gym. Classic race. And like I said, I promised Laz 30 plus years ago that I would be there every year, and I kept my word.
Yes.
I was actually one of the ones that got to run it during COVID. He had a limited field COVID year.
Gotcha.
And he said that you had to be able to drive to the race morning of, which I'm able to do. It's 90-minute drive. He had all these different rules. And if you look at his little handbook, he's got a black line through that year. He said nobody counts on that year. Right. But I'm here to tell you, I ran it, and it does count. And if you look at Ultra Sign Up, the results are there.
It counts, yeah.
I'm going to tell you what, that was the hardest year I ever had at Strolling Gym. He made us show up 5 minutes before your start time, and you were the only one. Oh. So I go up, I get my number. There's no one there. I walk up to the starting line, and he had a set time, and then you start and you go, and you were totally alone.
Oh,
so
wow.
I saw like 3 people that day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it felt like you were on a training run alone.
Right.
In fact, I think to this day, that was my slowest Strolling Gym was that year.
Wow.
it was just a weird year.
I've done
But
some time trial stuff like that, like in the Alps, for like where they start somebody every 30 seconds. And it really messes with your head, right? Because as a runner and a competitive runner, you're used to, I'm pacing off other people. For me, I'm like, I'm typically not the person way out front, but if I'm racing, I'm like, oh, my goal is try to be top 20, 10,
yeah,
20%, right? But there's always a couple rabbits, okay, that's not my pace. But when you're
yeah,
just like, all right, I gotta look. And most of the time I have a Timex watch on, or I'm not even wearing one. Like I don't own a GPS watch anymore, so I would have no idea how to pace that. Like I guess you just run how you feel, right?
yeah. I mean, it's a time trial. That's all it is. It's a time trial. But there's been a lot of funny stories happened over the years. But the COVID year was a really weird year. When they talked about canceling it, and Laz wasn't going to let that happen because his race is one of the older ultra marathons, and it has to be consecutive years, I think, to count. So
Uh,
if he'd have pulled the race that year, I think it would have messed up, his. I don't know. I heard some rumors that you've got to have consecutive years of the race for it to be of some kind of record because it's one of the older races now. I think.
so
Uh,
have you ever like? There's a question I wanted to get into like during all this, and segueing from this is, have you ever run a race with Gary or Laz?
no.
No.
Um, I will at Strolling Jim because he ran Strolling Jim some.
Okay.
If I recall, I think I remember him being out there some years where he was actually uh, participating. I'm not 100% sure. Now, I've run with his son several times in at Strolling Jim.
Okay.
He's got a son that runs.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and his son has run Strolling Jim several times, and we've run several miles together actually.
That's awesome.
And it's fun running with him, running with Gary's kid, because of course he's an adult now. He's probably in his 30s.
Right, right.
But you know, I think I would have to look at some of my really old result books or ultra running magazines because that's used to be the only place you could find results. I think I was in some 24-hour races that Gary was in.
Okay.
Like some because 24-hour races used to be the big deal in the 80s. I mean, my first two ultras were both 24-hour races because there were so many of them. I mean, there was 24-hour races constantly, and I swear I remember being in some 24 hours with Gary, and just maybe some other odd distance races with Cantrell.
That's awesome.
He wasn't Laz back then. I
No.
always call him Gary, and people are like, "Who are you talking about?" Laz.
No, I got
Yeah,
it.
he goes by Laz, and the Laz, where Laz came from? It came from email because there was no emails back in those days either. So when he got email, he started calling himself Laz on his emails, and that's where the whole Laz came from. Was his email because there were no emails when I started running Strolling Jim 37 years ago.
Think you
Email.
need to you got so much like cool ultra running and trail running history here in the South. I
Oh
mean, it's like
Lord.
you need to write like a book, or I'd love to even see like photos of like your old, you know, log and stuff like that from the races, man. That would be
I've
really
still got
cool.
all my logs. I kept the logs. I kept a paper log all the way through the 90s. And now with Strava and all, I just let Strava, I'm too lazy now. I let Strava keep up with my mileage. I keep a spreadsheet with my end of the year, like totals, and just kind of keep a running total. I add up my miles every year. So I know that's why I know I hit 115,000 after this last calendar year. And I just, once a year, I add the miles and just, it is what it is. And I keep up with the races the same way. Just, if you sign a waiver and you line up, you ran the race.
Right.
And that's the way I blog races. It doesn't matter if it's a big race or a small race or Boston or New York or whatever. Western. I've been counting them. I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe it's a sickness. I don't know.
No,
Something,
I think it's awesome, man, because you're obviously you're able to look back and see all the stuff that you've done, and obviously share this with other people. And it's funny, I think, as kind of shifting into like some final thoughts on this. Like we're at hour 15 in. It seems like we've been talking for 10 minutes. Man, I could talk with you forever. This has been great. But I think in summation for this whole podcast, I really hope everybody enjoyed this. Dink is an awesome guy. Got to have him on again. Dude, you're a legend. I appreciate everything that you've done for the sport. Starting Mountain Mist. I mean, being that guy to go to the Huntsville Track Club and say, I want to put on a trail race, a 50K. I mean, that's so amazing to me. I mean, there are people that are leading the way, and it's crazy at, my age. You've been running for as long as I've been alive, and that race has been going on almost as long as I've been alive. And I hope that in some way, shape, or form that, not only Sean Blanton, but, you've inspired me, but I hope that we can both continue to inspire the generation past us, like how you were saying there weren't any trail races in Alabama. I hope that we continue to have more races, more runners, more participation. And for anybody listening, please go run Mountain Mist. Please go. It's an awesome race. I'm definitely running next year. It's going to be my A race for the whole year, 30th annual. I feel like it's going to be huge. Dink's an awesome race director. So check that out. Also check out Chiaha, Pinhoti. They're awesome. Alabama is an amazing place to run. Dink, you're awesome, dude. Here's to 57 more years, brother.
Well, thanks for having me. Like I said, running's been my life, and I just want to keep people moving. That's what we got to do. There are health benefits, and I think if everybody in America ran, we'd be living in a different world.
Ain't that the truth, man? Well, I appreciate it, Dink. I appreciate everybody for listening and watching the Bend Don't Break podcast.